few weeks ago, I started trying to write out what I was going to say to you all today, but I couldn't. I tried multiple times, but apparently this was not going to be any ordinary writer's block. This sucker was pulling out all the stops. So I decided to just take a step back and figure out what was at the root of it. And that's when I realized that there were actually several roots. First, there was a root of exhaustion. You know, I've been writing and talking about mental illness and higher ed for several years now, and I have seen so little change because of it. I sometimes feel like I'm just shouting into the abyss, and it gets really tiring. Then there was a root of anger. Why? Why weren't people listening? Why was I having to work so hard at this? Why couldn't they see that this is a problem? I dug a little deeper still, and the deepest, darkest, most ridiculously strong root was one made of fear. I'm afraid, because if we don't change how we address or fail to address mental illness in our coworkers and colleagues, we could lose them. And I don't mean just lose them from the field. I mean, we could lose them from our lives entirely. And what makes that fear more palpable is that I could be one of them. But I also realize that I'm really fortunate to be here with you all today. It can be challenging to get a forum to talk about this topic. We're all part of an organization and a conference here that does a really good job supporting us as professionals, but it also sometimes forgets that we're people too. The majority of our programs focus on students, as they should, but that doesn't mean we don't also make space to discuss ourselves. Because if we can improve ourselves, we can also improve our services to students. So I'm really happy actually to be here and have a little time and space to talk about this today. First, let me back up. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. When I was in high school, that was the first time I considered killing myself. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be the last time. In fact, throughout most of my life since then, I have considered suicide on and off. About 4 years ago, I was the director of residence life at my institution. After 2 years as an associate director with no director, and then another year as a director with no associate director on the horizon, I hit my limit. On a particularly harsh day in August, of all months, I closed the door to my office, crawled under my desk, and I sobbed. And I don't mean I cried, I mean I sobbed. That kind of crying, you know, where you can't breathe, where it physically hurts because you're crying so hard. I wasn't sure at that moment if I could keep doing this. That was the first time that my husband and I talked about hospitalization. And pardon my language, but we were scared shitless. We did not know how it was going to affect our family or our lives, and what seemed really important in that moment, we had no idea how that was going to affect my job. I didn't know if I could face people at work after something like that. I didn't know if I'd still be able to supervise my staff. And everyone would probably be wondering, much like we were, honestly, whether I could still handle the strain if it happened again. Whether or not it was the best decision for me at that time, we instead went to my doctor and upped my medication. It seemed the only viable option at that time. A little over a year ago, I shared this story for the first time on a national stage where it was recorded and then published on YouTube. Although I'd written about my depression before, I very cautiously began to share that video out among my friends and colleagues. Two things became readily apparent to me at that time. One, most of my colleagues had no idea what I'd been going through. And two, I was not alone. A third thing also became apparent to me. Those of us who are experiencing it did not feel safe telling the people that we worked with about our illnesses. I mean, what the hell, people? Correct me if I'm wrong, but we all work in a field where being successful depends on our ability to be empathic towards our students. How do we just turn that off when it comes to talking to our colleagues and coworkers? What is going on there that we are doing that? More importantly, if we can't support and understand our colleagues with mental illness, are we really providing that safe a space for our students? Or are we also continuing to treat them as an other? About 3 years ago now, I worked with a colleague and friend, and we started gathering stories from people. We decided to, for Mental Health Awareness Month, share stories of mental illness in higher education with our friends and colleagues. We started the month thinking, maybe we'll get 1 or 2 a week, if we're lucky. We ended that month with 22 different stories about mental illness from student affairs professionals. And that was just the beginning. Since then, we've published over 60 stories from people talking about their experiences with mental illness, either their own or a loved one. 60 stories, and we're still going. When I gave that talk, I was on this particularly effective cocktail of antidepressants that had been working for me for quite some time at that point. And I really felt like if I could stay on that, I could manage my depression from then on. So naturally, shortly after I gave that talk, my insurance stopped covering one of the medications. And I don't know what your student affairs salary looks like, but mine certainly cannot cover an extra $200 a month for just one medication. $200 a month for one medication. So yeah, I had to find a new drug. It's hard for me to explain to people who don't have mental illness what it's like to switch meds. Well, I'm gonna try. I'm gonna compare it to getting a really, really bad haircut, with the understanding, of course, that it's much, much more serious and difficult. So let's say you get your haircut and you think, okay, it looks bad, but maybe it's not that bad. And then you go in public, and people stare and point and laugh, and there is nothing, but nothing that you can do about it. And so all you can do is just wait for it to grow out. More importantly, you don't even know if it grows out, if it's gonna look right. It may look just as bad. And that first time, it does, it looks awful. So you go get it cut again, and God, it's still bad. But this time it grows out and it looks great. So you're rocking your hair, you're looking good, life is great. And then your 5-year-old discovers scissors and cuts a big chunk out of it. Well, crap. Now you gotta start all over again. So yeah, switching meds, sort of like that, only like I said, much, much worse. First, you don't know what side effects are gonna kick in. You don't know if the meds are gonna work. You probably won't know for several weeks. And just when it feels like they might be starting to work, they stop. You're screwed, you gotta start all over again. All while in the middle of having a major episode of depression or anxiety or whatever else. And a lot of these drugs were originally tested on men. So if you're a woman, you might have to search twice as long to find a drug that works for you. It took me a little over a year to find a new medication that worked. My life was a complete roller coaster during that time, including additional conversations about hospitalization. So try, for just a second, try to put yourself in my shoes and think about going to work every day when your life is like that. You know what sucks even more than that? Despite the fact that after 15 months, I found a medication that's pretty effective with my depression, it only works so-so for my anxiety. And I can still experience episodes of depression while I'm on it. Yep, that's right. I take a medication that may not even work sometimes. So keep that in mind the next time you ask somebody, did you forget to take your meds this morning? Or better yet, don't ask it, because it's offensive. And honestly, that may be the only thing between me and a complete breakdown on that day. It's better to ask somebody if they need help, or if they're doing okay. So as I mentioned, life is like a roller coaster during that time for me. And I consider giving a talk like this a little bit like that up and down experience. The up, of course, is being here today, getting to share my story with you all, getting to give you inspiration and motivation to take this message back to your campuses. And for the next couple weeks, I have this hope that the work that I'm doing is going to sprout branches. The down, of course, you guys probably know this. The down is when that regular work starts to kick in and you forget all the cool things you were going to do that you learned about at this conference, including advocating for and promoting your colleagues with mental illness. The big difference is that I can't forget. I have mental illness. It's always with me. I have to go to work every day. I have to do that work every day. So that's my challenge for you all today. I'm asking you to do the work. You don't have to do it every day. In fact, you could just do it one day a week. I'll even take 30 minutes of that day. What does that work look like for you all? That work's educating yourself about mental illness so that you can eradicate the stigma that surrounds it, not just for your students, but for your friends, for your coworkers and your colleagues. There we go. That work is finding ways to create a supportive and understanding environment for everyone with mental illness so that they can come to your offices and feel okay to share their experiences, to get help. So do the work. Go read an article about mental illness. Make sure your colleague or your supervisee knows it's okay to make that counseling appointment. Stop saying, it's so crazy at work, or I'm so OCD, or so depressed, unless you really are. Find a training, either on your campus or in the community, to learn more about helping those with suicidal ideation. Check out the Committed Project. It's a little website I run. You can read stories about other student affairs professionals who are struggling with mental illness. Do the work, not just for the next 2 weeks. Do the work for a month. Do the work for a year. Do the work and make your campuses a safer place for anybody who is struggling with mental illness. I'm not going to lie to you. It's not an easy road ahead. There are a lot of bumps. But the more people that we get walking alongside of us, the more manageable that road gets to be. So today, on behalf of your colleagues with mental illness, and for me, I'm asking you, do the work.